E. Right, got that right. Okay, hello everyone. Yeah, we are gathered here today to paint along. Hang on. Yeah, to go through the painting, the preparation and painting processes for this figure that has come to us at Malcolm Source. So we've done things in the past, and just go through aspects of what I've done. There are videos out there already of we did this, the Dothraki figure. So I can't remember which one was which, but one of these got two of them. One was painted for the video, and one was painted during these Thursday night sessions. So just to illustrate where we're going and what hopefully you can learn from doing it, or will hopefully convey some of the ideas and stuff. So this is what we've done in the past in these sessions, but it's been a few weeks since we finished those. But these again were supplied by Asmodee, and we did some cleaning up, more or less, for those. And just to illustrate some of the bits and pieces that I've done myself, just to illustrate, if you've seen Games Workshop stuff. So there's a Games Workshop Necron on the base. So this is the kind of thing I do. I do historical stuff as well, but because we're doing a fantasy figure here, I'll grab some fantasy bits. Not everything I do is human, so there's some orky type stuff going on here. So we should be able to do something similar with the paints we've got in these sets we've been provided with, because this was actually done with the same brand of paint, not necessarily exactly the same paint. So sort of things we can achieve. And just to show something a bit bigger as well, this lovely chap here. So again, that's the kind of thing with the paints we've got and the character we've got. We should be able to do something along those lines, or at least point you in the right direction to achieve those kind of things. Right, but starting at the beginning, the figure we've got is a bit of an oddball compared to, say, this is a multi-part plastic kit from Games Workshop, Warhammer, or whatever they're called these days, and we have to assemble it. This has been provided in one piece already made, and you can see we've already had some discussion about this. You can see the join under his arm, you can see the gap in his face, where this has been pre-assembled, and you'll also see that I've already mucked around with it because I've been trying to work out the best way to do some of these things. It also came primed, so they've applied some kind of primer to it. So in theory, the paints in the box that come with it, you can start painting straight away. You don't have to do anything. Because this is more, looking at this more broadly, I personally, don't, if you can hear noises behind, by the way, I've got a whippet sitting behind me, and scratching the sofa the chair is on. Apologies for that. But yeah, you can see that there are areas where you can see on the underside of that kind of weird skirt thing, there is a mold line. Mold lines are common all over with model kits of all origins. And the trouble is here is that often you might clean up a mold line before assembly. That wasn't done here, and it was then assembled. So in an ideal world, if you could take his arm off, you could get to areas and clean those mold lines off. For me personally, and whatever I say here, no one's obliged to do any of this. You can just paint them if you like. I prefer to get, because of the way I'm going to paint, I prefer to get a clean surface to apply the paint. So gaps under his arms don't look natural. His Glaswegian kiss, also doesn't look natural. So other than cleaning up mold lines, also going to try and fill gaps. You might also notice, I don't know what yours is like, but the axe is a bit droopy on mine. It's kind of, because it was slightly soft plastic, it's bendy and kind of drops down below the level of the base, which is a bit weird. I might do it today. I might have to work out a way of doing it later, but it's probably possible to, and without trying to overcomplicate things, but I might do it for my own purposes, to cut this off here and apply a brass rod by drilling a hole with a pin vise and just keeping that a bit straighter. But it's not essential. Some might not do that. It might even be possible for me to heat it with a hairdryer and then hopefully change the angle of it. But so what I'm going to try and do now is, hang on a sec, is try and deal with some of the mold lines. Like I say, because this is, I'm not going to do them all today because that would be quite boring to watch, but offering some ideas and ways of doing it, because you can see here there's a mold line going across the arm there, or some mark that isn't natural. You can see one. I've cleaned a few off already, but for me, things like that under his knuckles, you can see some little lines going. Those kind of things, like I say, you're more than welcome to leave them. I found when I was painting the Dothraki that one or two mold lines popped up when I was painting it, and I found it difficult to do some of the shading and glazing and methods I use to do the lights and lighting effects and things. So I personally would rather get rid of them than keep them. So ways we can do that, there's lots of different ways, and some work better on some surfaces than others.
Now, can I ask a question, Rob?
Yeah, sure.
So they all come primed.
Yeah.
And I noticed that yours hasn't got some primer on it. It looks like it's been taken off. Is that you sort of trying to sand it down, or?
Well, what I found was I think some of the mold lines look worse because they've got a lot of primer over them, and it's kind of built up, and I guess these are going through a factory and getting some overall spray on them, and so some angles when the spray primer hits those mold lines, it becomes, they catch the mold line and accentuate the mold line. So that's what, and so when you're trying to remove the mold lines on this, you by default remove some of the primer, because the mold line has primer on it. And in doing that, I then kind of started going, it's actually hard to work out where the mold line, can I even see if the mold line's gone? So I then started mucking around with, I think I did it with the Asmodee or with the Dothraki guys. I tried using some Tamiya extra thin and just running it over where the mold line was, and it ended up removing paint or the primer. And then yesterday I started testing some acetone nail polish remover to see if that would remove the paint without damaging the model itself. So I started looking at that there. So it is possible, if a bit stinky, to remove some of the primer using acetone or liquid cement, and that is is handy for when you're doing this to be able to see it. Now, just to go through some of the methods. The good old needle file is one way of doing it. I found it's not my favourite way, but sometimes you get areas where I'm going to try and see those knuckle bits there. The plastic, sometimes using a file on slightly soft plastic will do less filing and do more kind of just pushing the that's not really doing a lot. No.
Oh yeah, it's starting to cut a groove in there. I see that.
And it's a good tool because of the angle, because you've got a rounded edge in there. But one of I think sometimes you've sent mold removers, Malcolm, and some people with
not specifically. We would have sent out sanding sticks to beneficiaries, but they probably wouldn't work on this.
No, but what I've been using is a knife blade. This is where you'll see, I'm holding that about 90 degrees and scraping, and that comes off. That seems that's easier on some of the other angles, because this is a really awkward angle because it's on the underside.
And so why do we need to clean it up then? Won't the paint cover it?
Your paint will be so thin that, certainly the way I paint, the paint will be thin and you will still see that mould line. Nice. Now, like I say, this is on the underside of a knuckle, which might be quite tricky to see anyway. But it's all, these things also exist on. Hold on, let me see if I can find one. You can see there is that is a mould line coming down here. You can see it going here, all the way across there. Again, that's on the underside, but for me, when I come to paint it, it will get in the way. Some are more obvious. You can also see here, it's difficult to see that I have removed it because I'm also scraping off some of this primer. Which complicates what should be a lovely simple act. But personally, I find scraping with a knife blade like this easier. Also, another way doing it is this is a scalpel blade people use. This is the number 11. Now I find it quite effective to. Where's that angle again? Because I use this in my sculpting. I have more control than trying to use a whole knife in my hand. But the key thing here is, I'm just going to use it. I'm going to use the extra thin, and now this is because I've scraped that portion. I'm going to use my extra thin just to run over that area. And that kind of gets rid of the excess scraped away paint or primer, and allows you to see where you removed the mold line, and you can see what in that leg. In there, you can see where I've done that already. I might still go through and try and remove a little bit more primer. A little bit more primer in some areas to try and get down as far as I can before repriming it. And there's a good example of when we paint a figure like this. When people look at him, the first thing they're really going to look at is his face. Got a lot of character to it. He's an evil thing, and they'll come in and look close. And there's a seam, a mold line on mine, going right down onto it, that kind of cheekbone thing. And that's, I'm going to want to put paint on here, and I'll put a little bit of highlight to catch, give this a bit of dimensionality. And if I'm trying to put a highlight, my paintbrush is just going to keep hitting that line, and the paint won't go on very well. So that is a classic example of something I'd want to get rid of before painting. Plus, we'll come to that after the break. That's quite a big gap that I don't want in mine, so I'll be filling that, but offering some ideas and tips on how that can be done. But yes, I'm going to try and see if I can get this to the right angle. When you get a pause, it's probably because I'm trying to get it in frame for you to see, and also look at it with my own eyes to actually do it. I haven't quite worked out how to look down into the camera to work. It's a bit weird doing that. But the blade, this is a number 15 blade. So after we do this today, I'm still going to go through and spend some time trying to clean up lots of the other bits and pieces, but I'm just going to very quickly see if I can get this to use some of this acetone to stink out this room. I mean, let me just see. Ooh.
I guess there's some parts of it you don't want to take off. There's obviously veins in the wings and stuff. Or dust. Or
you being able to work out, some of those things like that are vein. I think there's some dust got on into the drying primer on some bits on mine. It's not as smooth as you might like it to be. Definitely. This is like I say, this is the acetone I'm using here, which isn't damaging the plastic underneath. But that I can't see it. So there's only really a remnant now. Oh, you can just see some paint from the primer is still kind of sitting where that was. There might be some on the other side. You can see on this side here, that seam.
I guess everyone's going to have different seams in different places as well, aren't they?
Yeah, and like I say, your tolerance of them, you might not care if they're there or not. And I think I can see.
Yeah, I think time spent making sure the figure is sculpted correctly for you is important. The time spent, I mean.
Yeah, sometimes, certainly I've found, you can sometimes get a figure that really appeals to you and you really love it, but you spend so much time cleaning it up, I believe is the expression, that you absolutely hate it by the time you get to get round to painting it. They can, some figures can be a real pain to do your preparation, but preparation, like in many things, is pretty critical. For some people, building a model can be the joyful part. For others, it can be the painting. There's different elements of it that are what people enjoy. When that, I'm getting a bit of the cotton wool stuck to his face and to the paint there, but there's still some bits and pieces to do. Yeah, like I say, for me, if I'm going to paint a horn on his head, I want the horn to look round all the way and not have a little line going up it, because that's the mould seam. So that's the kind of thing I'm going around getting rid of. Some bits, you might see a seam coming down out the part of the line of the wing. Those kind of places where because that would have been a mould line, 2-part mould. I think I found they sanded down quite nicely with a sanding stick of some description. Things like that work very well in some angles, but something like this is such a complex mixture. I mean, that's why they did it in multi-part, because it's a complex shape.
Yeah.
And they've tried to make it something you can just pick out of the box and paint. And as I say, you're more than welcome to pick it out of the box and paint. But
questions here, Rob.
Yeah.
Steve wants to know if there is a way that the figure can be dipped to remove the primer completely, and also Nick says that is it not worth removing all of the primer and then filling and then cleaning up?
Yes, there probably is. There is probably a way of. I haven't got enough to dip anything, and there is probably a way of speeding that up. I'm probably doing it in sections and making it a little bit more complex than it needs to be. But yes, very, very much so. Yeah, if you've got I guess dipping it for a little bit. I can't say how long it would tolerate a bath, but I'm sure it would tolerate quite a bit of a bath. And then going through with a old toothbrush and giving it a scrub would get rid of most of it. Yeah. I might still end up doing that myself, because it is quite annoying, because like I say, when you scrape this paint off, or when you scrape the seams, you do find you get little flakes of paint just as much as you get flakes of the plastic. And because every single, because the arms would have been separate, the head seems to be in at least chin, head, 2 parts. Each one of those parts has its own mould line, at least one mould line on going round it, and that will be on a different orientation, which creates it a little bit more of a complex thing when it's reassembled. You're not just looking for one mould line going down the side of the entire body. This has got mould lines going in multiple directions.
Yeah.
And
Would you recommend anything to dip this in? I guess you haven't tested it.
no, I mean, like, it's there if you've got acetone in quantity, or with a nail polish remover, which is acetone.
Can't see that. I have to zoom out.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, this is just for boots. I think I've developed for weak dry nails. I don't know how. But obviously there are issues with using this. But yeah, those are entirely feasible and possible and things to do if you've got time and inclination to test it. By all means, do. I was also kind of thinking. Part of me was thinking, wouldn't it be nice if I could just wobble this arm enough for it to come off, and then I could clean that up properly? But these are fixed on very well, and I'm not gonna. I can't really. I don't really want to risk breaking that, because I can see there under his legs. There are another part and another gap to fill, which is why you've got the mould line underneath his skirt.
Cool.
So yeah,
take a break in about 5 minutes, Rob, right?
Yeah, sure, because I think there's only so far we can go with this. When we're painting, normally it's like describing, it's like watching paint dry, but watching somebody remove mould lines is probably even worse, to be honest. But yeah, have a look at your figure. Imagine, I often, when I'm doing it, I'm thinking, well, how would the brush go on now? If I'm painting something and I've got a brush, demonstrate that. And can I get my brush in there? How would my I've got a line. If I'm trying to paint that shape coming around here on his arm, I'm going to hit that line when I'm painting, and that's going to stop me doing a nice smooth flow. So I want to remove this line here, because that will stop how I paint. Which is why when I'm cleaning it, I'm thinking, how would the paint apply in here? Something like that's fine. That's got a nice smooth area. These are great smooth areas. Which is why, going back to that cheek, when that line was coming down here, I'm going to be putting paint. It will have a green colour across the whole thing, but I will highlight it with, or even add some other colours in to make it interesting. And I want to put those on. So the logic is, how would my paintbrush behave when I come across those seam lines? Arguably, I'm going to want to put something dark and black around, because it's in the shadow at the base of these, so you could get away with not removing the seams on the bottom of this loinclothy thing. So yeah, you could definitely get away with not removing those. But even as I go around here now, I can see a line going down there, a bit of a seam. But my volume, when figure painters talk, they talk about volumes, and the volume you're going to paint here is this muscle and this thigh, but there's a line coming down there, and I'm going to want to remove that. You can see hints where I've removed things going down on his foot. So that's kind of a logic. They can see again here when the mold makers are deciding how they're going to cast these things. When you've got something sticking out the surface, and you'll see it on aeroplane models, you'll see it on tank models. The two parts of the mold will often have something relate. If you've got something sticking out, so you can see coming down here, there is a line going up over these spikes on his forearms. I'm going to want to get even clearer there. They're going to have to go for me, because I'll get in the way, and I'll only curse about it in a future episode of this.
Yeah, so a bit of time spent early.
Time for me. That preparation time is pretty important, because you'll be happier in the end. You won't be going, I wish I got rid of that.
Yeah.
And when you'll often find that often with some of these Games Workshop figures, there'll be a seam line, mold line somewhere. But when you actually put these multi-part ones together, they're so cleverly done. Tamiya especially are very good at this. That mold line will actually disappear behind another part, so you really don't even have to remove it. It's not until you assemble it you go, that's covered up by that. I didn't need to do that. So, and that's what a clever and intelligent, experienced manufacturer will do. And then at the same token, the plastic kit ones, this guy is a resin bust, single piece resin bust, and had very little, is by a renowned company, and had very few mold lines on it. But you wouldn't get many mold lines on it anyway, because it's a one piece casting, and it would have gone across the top of his head and across his shoulders, and very simple. So good manufacturers will think about these things, and they've thought about them, but because of the desire to or the way they're marketing this as get it out and paint it straight away and not have to do all the fiddly bits, they have left made a few shortcuts. And as I say, you're more than welcome to leave them and carry on, and it might be a good learning experience to do that.
But we've got a couple of people in the chat said that Clive says that he's had good results dipping in Dettol for 2 hours plus. I assume that he means the figure and not himself. You could try Dettol. And John says a small test tells me isopropyl alcohol and some elbow grease, the cotton bud removes the fine. So that's what we'll do now, Rob, is we'll just pause this video and then we can invite people to unmute.
Okay. Recording in progress. Right. Yes, go for it.
Yeah. So once you clean it up and fill the gaps, what primer would you put on it? And will there be some filling tips before we get into painting?
Yes. Well, I'm definitely not going to prime now because I tend to do that outside. I think there is a YouTube video where I prime a figure, because often that kind of thing isn't always covered in videos, and I believe it is this figure, which I did. I demonstrated painting him in these sessions, but I also did some painting on YouTube videos of him as well. So the actual priming is kind of noisy, and you go outside, and I go outside and do it. But priming, I will use probably a Citadel Chaos Black kind of thing. You could use white. I have come to the conclusion that for the most part, grey, white, or let me just cover that. Grey, black, white, any of those colours are perfectly fine. There's no ideal one or the other. If you go black, it might you a few more layers of paint to build up the colour you want. If it's a paler primer, it will look more vibrant more quickly. I really quite like Tamiya Fine Surface Primer, available in Hobbycrafts usually. It's a really nice, good primer. It really covers well and kind of clings very nicely to the model. Another one, which is pretty much the same stuff, I think, but just a black colour by Mr. Hobby, is the 1500 Black. I quite like that as a primer. These are nice. Those two are both nice because they show up any imperfections. You can have a look because they kind of contract around everything. However, I do find sometimes they can be a little bit, like I personally can end up with a little bit of sheen, which means that acrylic water-based paints don't always take to it straight away. They kind of almost puddle. They can puddle a little bit, or kind of the surface tension can pull. So I personally quite like, or what I have done myself in the past is I might have primed with something like that and then given another coat of this afterwards, because this has a little bit more of a matte finish to it and the paint clings to it really nicely, and it's a really nice thing to do. So there's no, everything will work. Even a Halford's car primer, grey primer, black primer, even the red primers and things, all those things are perfectly viable, absolutely perfectly viable. What I'm not going to do in this is kind of do any, you might see people talking about zenithal lighting, which is creating, painting it dark and then spraying from one angle or whatever, something like that, with a lighter color on top to show your highlights. That we could do. I've done it in the past, but it kind of has the potential to overcomplicate things. So I'm going to mention it, and that's it. I'm not going to say it again because I'm not going to do it. Partly because if you try doing it with rattle cans, you'll end up with, if you're not doing it right, you'll end up with spray in the wrong places, and you might be too far away, and you end up with it could just go horribly wrong. So I could keep it simple. So yeah, they're the kind of primers I use.
And then filling tips before.
Yeah, I was actually going to do some filling on the fly, as it were. No, that's partially. Now, my favourite filling, personally, is Milliput 2-part epoxy. There are other equivalent similar things, such as this Magisculpt, which is another 2-part epoxy putty. I like these because they are they accept, they're water soluble. You can even you can actually thin them and make them almost runny, slurry kind of mixture with water, which has its uses. There is the classic green stuff that you can get from Games Workshop. Is the classic source of green stuff, which comes in, well, you could in a yellow and blue strip, which mix together makes green. It comes in different forms. It comes in a ribbon strip. It can come like this. It is good for sculpting. But its character is when it dries, or when you're filling gaps with it. I find it hard to smooth it because it's kind of got a slightly rubbery consistency to it, and once it's dry, it's harder, not impossible, but harder to sand. And if you wanted to do some sanding on it, so that's why I favour myself the 2-part epoxies like Milliput or the Magisculpt. Now I use Magisculpt to sculpt figures as well. It has, because I can carve it and I can work on it soft. So that's something I'm sculpting, just to illustrate how you can use these things not just for filling gaps. They have other uses. There are also putties. So there are Squadron green
Yep.
putty exists.
Yep.
These are air drying fillers, and these are equally as usable. If you're just filling a gap and all you want to do is fill that gap, these are great. Again, these are good because, for example, there is a little bit of the gap in his face here. It would be nice to smooth that up and down around his mouth, and it will be easier, and you'll accidentally learn some basic sculpting in the process to fill that gap with Milliput. I'm not going to use the Magisculpt because that's not quite so easily available. Milliput you can often find in Hobbycraft and places like that. And the standard Milliput is perfect and relatively, you get a lot. £3.50 gives you a lot of stuff. I'm also going to cover tools we can use to do this, and hopefully by the end demonstrate filling some gaps and some useful tips and things along the way.
Well, that's all the questions we had over the break.
Okay, well, we're going to carry on with the filling. 2-part epoxy. It's what I'm going to have to. I was mucking around actually. I was experimenting the other day with the Magisculpt, and I think the same would apply to the Milliput, which was made in North Wales, if you didn't know, and Dolgelly. You might find if you have Milliput, you'll get some kind of chemical weird reaction on the outside of it. It's all perfectly usable and mix fine. So I just roll it in my fingers and just keep rolling it. At this point, I usually look at my watch and I say, right, I'll give it 2 minutes to roll that together. But what I discovered was I could, I think LJ alluded to this by saying she had green stuff in the fridge or freezer. I can't remember. Once I've mixed this, I've been putting it in the freezer, and 24 hours later, once even mixed, it slowed down the curing process. And so if you mix too much and you've got projects you want to do or you get called away, you can still use it because you tend to have lots left that what we'll use to fill the gaps on here won't be we won't use it all, and there's going to be some that will be left over at the end, which is a bit very classic for 2-part putties, because once you've mixed it, it will go and cure. You can't stop it. It is a chemical reaction. But while I'm mixing that, I'm going to go through some tools to use to apply this, because you're only going to be able to do so much with your fingers. Now, there are purpose-made tools. This is known as a wax carver number 5, and is the tool. You might be able to buy something similar from Games Workshop, but this is what Games Workshop were using before they began making their own. So it's got a kind of a flat spade end that side, and a more rounded end this side. Stainless steel. This one comes from a company called Taranti in London. I've had it for decades, and it's a good all-round sculpting tool, but also good for the purposes we're going to use it here. Don't go and rush out and buy one of those, because you can also get a cocktail stick and sand the end of it, dip it in super glue, sand it again, dip it in super glue, sand it again, and you've got a perfectly good sculpting tool for cheapest chips, all that kind of stuff. You can make that end any number of shapes for purposes you want. For example, I made one here with a slightly flat end, and this one's got a kind of a point. This has kind of got a spade end, like the other one, like the metal tool, and that's good. But that's just been dipped in super glue and becomes quite a solid, hard sculpting tool, and versatile and cheap. That's a tip for if any of you know the legendary figure modeler sculptor Bill Horan, that's all he uses, and he has that kind of thing. But yeah, those are handy. Another useful thing, and are the rubber-tipped, described as color shapers. But these are really good for sculpting and filling gaps, because you can push the paint into the gap, or push the putty into the gap you're going to do. Other things, I've got a giant needle. Anything that's kind of is solid, hard, and has an interesting shape has the potential to be used in some form or other for sculpting. I know people who have got a lump of metal and round it to the shape they want. Another thing you can buy are these you can get these things, probably not in the sculpting part, but another part of hobbycraft will sell something like this. Have a look around, and will quite useful if you ever find yourself getting drawn more and more into sculpting. Another thing we're not going to need today, but can be useful, is some form of rolling pin. This is the inside of an old, I guess we don't get them anymore, but ticket, till receipt kind of things. And my favourite, I'll be using this and demonstrating it. I have this lovely piece of Perspex, clear Perspex, which I will now demonstrate. Now I've finished filling, mixing this over here. Being ambidextrous here. What I'm going to want to do is, now that it's mixed, is I'm going to make little sausages and put them into the gaps. So just tearing off a little bit. Now, what this is really useful for, I've got my cutting mat, and if you've got a piece of glass, works really well, but even the melamine kind of desk will work well. Just see if I can zoom this in over here to illustrate this. Really good for rolling. See that there?
Yeah, let's see.
I've now got a sausage of milliput. What I tend to do is then I'll cut it in half, bit out of the way, because it'll go so far and then become unwieldy. Now I can, sometimes it gets stuck because it's still fresh and very sticky. This takes a light touch. And just for your general modelling needs and wants, if you roll that out and let it go hard, you've then got something you can carve when it dries, and it can be used. It could be used in the interior of a midget submarine, for example, if you needed a bit of something. It's got all sorts of ways you can use a epoxy putty and produce bits and pieces. When I'm sculpting a figure, if I'm trying to get the same size part of a cheek on a face, I'll cut it and have two equal sizes that I know are going to be the same size, and it's easy to do when you've got this in this way. So I only discovered about this a couple of years ago, and it's been one of the most useful little things in terms of doing this, which is why I put this glass on that side, because it just works really well. You can lay down some talcum powder to stop it sticking to this surface. I would do that if I was rolling it out, but obviously once you use the talcum powder, you lose the stickiness, and we want this to be sticky because we want it to go into the gap. Now what I'm going to try and do, I'm going to do the face, because it's probably the most complex bit of bits around the arm, push putty in and smooth it out. But let me just see what's going to be. I'm going to try to use it. No, not. Don't do that. Don't drop a giant needle on your lap. Let me just see. I'm going to pick up a little bit of putty, and I've just sliced down into the putty on the desk, which I can't quite do the zoom and show you that, but let's see. I've got some here, and I'm now going to. We're in the shop. You will find, and it can be a little bit awkward to actually. Initially, all I'm doing here, I'm just using a tip of the needle. That could be, just to illustrate. It could equally be a regular needle. I don't know where I got this from. My mum probably, but that's a giant needle relative to it, but it's a nice size for our purposes. So what I'm going to do is kind of push that. Some will, I often use the back of my thumb, dump out. I think this doesn't quite behave like the Magiscop I've been using recently. So just making sure I get that in there. There is some, you see the gap in the back there, so I've got to do it as well. I might just, while I'm here with this putty. Push that in. Now the nice thing about a shape of tool like this is that I'm kind of pushing it in, and behind his ear you can see I'm just kind of smoothing that up and out, and that shape fits really nicely in there. Now right, I'll get it to that stage. So the key thing about this was to get it in place. So now I've got the rubber tool. You can carry on using the other tool, but this is quite useful. And I can just start.
Is that to keep the contours of what's already there?
Yeah, it helps in keeping those contours. There's this line in the face coming down there. Now, a little tip. At the moment, I'm doing this with nothing on my tool, but you can use something like a baby lotion, body lotion. Let me just. Oh, I tend to do is just. This is really good with these. Oh, not that much. Ooh, my desk smells nice. I can tell.
All these wonderful products, Rob, are really great for your nails.
Yes. Good. Yeah, I mean, if we do get paint on your fingernails when you're painting, it's a classic thing to have your nail polish remover. What you can do as well with this kind of stuff, which is why I think it's a little bit better than some of these kind of materials for these awkward shapes, organic shapes, I'd probably call them, more than I kind of think these are great for filling mechanical shapes that they were, fuselages and the like. But when you've got this, and you to the point where you can use the I've got a brush, and I've got a little bit of this moisturizer, body lotion stuff, and I can smooth the surface of that. So in essence, when it dries, there's no need to, and you can go back with the tool on top. It'll actually work even better. There'll be no need to go back and try and sand any of this.
Is it just like a lubricant then for the tool and the putty?
You could use spit. I have in the past. Some people swear by spitting on the back of their hand and just running the tool through that. Not a fan of that myself, but that's a good lubricant as well. I've never used baby oil, but I'm sure somebody's tried that. But the body lotion stuff, that was from Mike Blank recommendation in one of his books, and you get one and it lasts forever, basically. As long as you don't pour it all over your desk, you'd be fine.
We've got about 10 minutes left, Rob.
Okay. So yeah, that's a key part about filling. You can just keep going and work. I'll try and do. What should we go? This big lummoxy bit on the end. So first thing I do. Often you'll find it sticks to your tool more than it wants to stick to the model. So half the battle is to get it off into the right vicinity, and then to manipulate it in that area without destroying details of the model, the moulding that's already there. And that's really difficult to do on camera, so apologies folks for that. But yeah, just kind of forcing it into the gaps.
How long does it take to cure?
Milliput will, you've probably got a good hour before it starts to go off. But even after it's gone off, it is possible to put it on roughly and smooth it even more before it, after about an hour, even an hour and a half, it's still got some workability. The behavior of it changes in that time, but in 3 hours it's completely, in 3 hours in normal room temperature it should completely cure hard, and then you could go and sand it if you wanted to.
Okay.
It's a really good material for that kind of thing. But like I say, you can see there that should be invisible by the time it cures, and I can go through, and I think a little bit more, for me it's a little bit more easier to use on this kind of shape than the tube fillers. Now, while I'm remembering, thinking about what we want to cover, that's a really awkward shoulder bit, isn't it? It's going to be an interesting experiment to see how this behaves with when I get some Dettol and see how Milliput behaves in Dettol. To be honest with you, that'd be quite fun. It might. I think the Milliput will probably behave. Won't even notice. You can see here, for example, there's kind of almost a clavicle neck bone bit there coming across, and I can make my gap filled so that looks forward. When that's primed, eventually you won't even realize that those were ever separate parts. That's the goal here. We're going through it here with the brush. Can smooth that down even more. So you can see the gaps are filled there, and where might not be able to do a good job because there's a wing in the way. There are things I'm going to have to deal with and accept aren't perfect. Just to illustrate a little bit more, that gap under the arm there, I'm going to kind of sculpt fill it, I guess I'd call it. So I'm going to fill it, but try to there we go, that's gone in quite nicely. I'm actually doing almost some sculpting in the process of how that comes under the arm. And so by doing that, you're effectively doing some very basic sculpting. So that arm, you can see how it looks compared to that arm. Mm-hmm. That should look really good when painted now, because it will blend in, and you can see the face in there, which I might just try and see if I can get that crease accentuated a little bit more. And the other thing I just want to comment on as well, we'll have a brief comment about paints as well, but before that, is the base. I think this came up in conversation a couple of weeks ago, just in a regular session. Excuse me a second, while voice gone. Have a quick. I made the tea. I'm going to drink some of it.
Yeah, I noticed that you're holding the figure, and before you'd have something to hold the figure as well.
Yes, yeah, that was right. What we did with the Dothraki, what I did with the Dothraki, I should say, is they came with a molded on base, and I ended up adding a base from Games Workshop. Now, so a separate plastic base, just because I felt it worked very nicely with the lines and things. It was a bit awkward when we were painting it, because before, the plastic base had some odd molded in details, and this guy's base has his feet molded in already. We can't easily remove him from the base and rebase him, and that's fine. I mean, we contemplate might end up putting some fine gravel on just to make the base a little bit more interesting. But I had this brainwave. This is just while I was looking at it before we even began, so about half an hour before tonight's session, I started thinking, oh, I wonder if I've got anything knocking around. We've got these, this guy's on a round, on a resin plinth, but that's a Games Workshop base. He's on there. And lo and behold, I'm not going to say you should get one, but I did find a few things that could potentially make this base a little bit neater and tidier and smarter, because it's kind of got an irregular shape. Initially, I found this, which is a Games Workshop flying base, but it's not flat, so it doesn't really work. Then I found this, which I've not, it's Games Workshop of something, but it's very thin. It would work perfectly, but it's very thin, and that's not an issue, but it's just because I found if anyone has any Games Workshop-y stuff and or even go into the store and ask if you've got one nearby, this is a 60 millimeter, 6 centimeter Games Workshop base. Perfect. I'm going to end up sticking my guy to this. It's a little bit more rigid. I don't know when I'm going to do it. I think I'm probably going to do it before, because I did these Dothraki right at the end, which was the wrong time to do it. But yeah, just an idea. But failing that, you're just going to paint this guy. When we're painting him, and even when you get him ready and you know you're going to prime him, that's the point where I attach my figures to a base, to something that I can hold and never touch my figure again with my fingers, unless I need to for one reason or another. But it's good to mount your figure onto something so that you're not going to touch him with your fingers, which might be greasy, might be paint covered with another colour. Anything could go wrong, or indeed you could wear off the paint that you've put on. So
we'll talk about that one next time, how to pin your figure or something.
Yeah, I was going to give some ideas now, and then people can find stuff.
Okay, so just be aware of the time.
Yeah. I'm not going to do anything now. I know when we're moving on. So so what I did last time, I'm just going very quickly. I've already shown. There are commercial things out there. Games Workshop provide things. This is a bit big for the simple handles Games Workshop provide, I believe. But there are things like this, which is more of a thing of beauty, because you've got things like that engraved in it. But it's there are products like this out there. However, I was a Dothraki. If you've got anything like, you can buy these online. These are demijohn stoppers. Very useful for mounting figures on. Very good for sculpting figures and whatnot. What I've done, because it's inherently annoying to try and get blue tack to stick to cork, is you can get some of your, this is Magic Sculpt, but you can get some Milliput and just press it onto press it onto the surface like that, and it will dry rock hard, and that becomes a better surface because it's smooth and not undulating, I guess, and porous like cork. And then for the most part, some blue tack, big lump of blue tack. And a good solid press down, and for the most part it might wobble a little bit, but then you've got something you can hold. It's not a heavy figure, even though it's big, it's still not heavy, because you're going to tip it up when we paint. We're going to hold it at different angles, so I would get it to this stage and then prime it, and then not take it off after priming it. This will be, you can see I've got black on here from priming something else at some point in time. This will be my chosen method for holding this figure, and then you can put it down, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, so I will also, like I say, I think the plan is next time to we're not going to prime live, not going to fill all this live and do the cleaning. Assume going forward I will have filled the gaps, cleaned all the lines of it, and primed it, ready to paint for the next time. Next time we'll put some paint on it. That is the plan. So I will, just a word, if you do anything like, if you do consider going for a base like that, when I put, this is milliput, you can see it cracked off the edge from here. What I didn't do when I mounted that before, score the surface of these things before applying the milliput in a grid pattern, and your milliput won't rise off the edge at the end. But that's what I forgot to do. That's what I believe I forgot to do. I'm not saying I did. It might not be that, but that's what I'm going to do this time when I do it. And I'm going to stick him on and put some milliput to blend it in, and prime it, and be ready to go next time.
Would you fix the axe before you primed it though?
Oh yes, that was I will, I think for my purposes, arguably, if I raised him on that might eliminate the need to do that, and you could argue he's got bendy axe.
Yeah.
But I still might do it, which, like I say, would involve sawing off at a point which I think would be behind this feature here.
Yeah.
And drilling into, it's going to be tricky. You'd have to hold that straight while drilling, and putting brass rod through from that kind of portion all the way through here. It's going to be tricky, but it might hold it up because he's a bit droopy, isn't he? I'm finding. So I haven't decided, to be honest with you. It's probably a little bit more complex. And if I did that, I would probably leave it separate while I paint the rest of him, because it's going to get in the way. But like I say, I'm not 100% sure if I will at this point.
Okay, brilliant. Is that everything for this week then, Rob?
Do just want to very quickly, well, I'll say very quickly as well while we're at it. And no, I don't think. Now, what I'm going to do in order to understand, I think this is the paint set. The idea is that we're all going to be able to at least use the same paints, come up with what we're going to do. We might end up with different results because we might decide to use different colours. But these are manufactured by Vallejo, who are a very established paint company. I've never used the paints in here before. However, we look up here, I do have Vallejo paints already in my collection of paints. So they shouldn't be a shock to me. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to channel a bit of LJ, and I'm probably going to make paint swatches from these. And yeah, so when I start painting with them next time, I'm not going to be surprised by what they do. And there is a paintbrush in here. I don't know the quality of paintbrush. I will use I will probably, for the most part, use my own regular brushes. This doesn't appear to have a size written on it. Oh, it's a brush round 1. So it's quite big in the grand scheme of paintbrushes. Look at that.
Is that the one that's in the box, or the one that's with the
that's
sticker?
the one. That's the one in the paint set. I think
Right.
is there 2 in there? There might be 2 in the
Maybe
in the other one. However, we're going to break a few myths, as it were, in terms of painting, because I'm going to be probably using, for a lot of the painting of this, that's the size 2 of another brand. So because we might be painting a miniature, but we're not going to be using small brushes for it. We're going to be you can do a lot of good painting with larger brushes. So the myth of using tiny brushes will hopefully throw out of the window. And then also, as we progress, because we're not going to paint him in 2 hours or even an hour and a half, depending on how the timing goes. We also have these Artisopus dry brushes, which I have dry brushed. I have every intention of using them during this, but I don't know how I'm going to use them. I might not use them in the conventional way. I don't know yet. A lot of this is winging it. But I'm going to try and use these in some form or other it could be to make some interesting effects on the wings. It could be to create some interesting skin effects on what is probably an unhealthy chap. So that's probably it. So we've covered cleaning mold lines, filling gaps, potential base brushes, and had a quick look at the paints. I might even use, well, I'm not going to even attempt to open them until we need to. Ooh. I might even end up using some of those in the box itself, because we've got 2 brushes in here as well, which is handy. We'll certainly try using these. I don't imagine they're going to be the best quality, but any brushes can be carefully used, and it's what we do with these paints. So
brilliant.
There we go.
Right, thank you very much, Rob. Well, I'll pause it now, and then we'll do another session in a couple of weeks.